Hello and welcome to the High Maintenance Hippie podcast. This is your host, Ashley from Ashley Taylor Wellness. On this podcast, we talk about all things beauty, health, wellness, and optimization. Being a high maintenance hippie represents not being boxed in, as I strongly believe that one size does not fit all. I'm a nurse turned coach, and I have learned so much about both conventional and alternative options, and I want to help you expand your options. I'm here to inspire you to learn new ways to improve your quality of life and to take your power back. I'm so excited that you're here, so let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to the High Maintenance Hippie podcast. Today's guest is Morgan Adams, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know her over the last couple of years. And we met on Instagram, but we found out we have some mutual friends, so that's pretty cool. We've also met at some biohacking conferences, and we share a lot of the same interests, so I'm really excited for this conversation. Morgan is a certified holistic sleep coach. She also has a master's in social work and just a wealth of knowledge, and she practices what she preaches and walks the walk. So I'm really excited to share some information that I hope will add value to your lives today. So thanks for being here, Morgan.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you, chatting about my favorite topic.
It's my favorite topic too. I didn't realize. So were you always passionate about sleep, or is this something that you've not recently, but later in life realized, oh, this might be more important than I realized?
Well, it's been an interesting journey with sleep for me because I had pretty severe insomnia about 18 years ago. So I had what they call sleep onset insomnia. So trouble getting to sleep. So I would lay awake at night for up to 2 hours most nights trying to fall asleep. It was caused by a relationship issue. And after about 2 months of it, I decided to go to my doctor and I was given Ambien. And so at the time that this was all going down, I was a pharmaceutical sales rep. So when I was given a pill to take to fix an issue, I was very willing to take the pill because pills were my life. I believed, wholeheartedly in the ability to use a pill to cure all the ills. And, I took the medicine and it did get me to sleep faster, so it solved that issue, but I had lots of side effects the next day. And we can talk more about side effects or sleeping pills later, but I was on them for about 8 years. And at about the 8-year point, I met a guy who is now my husband. And when we were newly dating, he said to me in a very loving way, when you take these pills, you act like a zombie, and it's kind of freaking me out. And that was like a wake up call. Like, these pills are no longer serving you. Mm-hmm. So I decided to do something that I don't recommend people do. And that is just kind of go rogue and do it yourself. Right. So I ended up, tapering the pills down, and I did fine. But really for somebody who is taking sleeping pills, what they really need to do is consult their prescribing provider, get a taper schedule, and then ideally work with someone like a sleep coach to provide that accountability and support. But anyway, by the grace of God, I got off the sleeping pills on my own and slept pretty well for many years after that. And then there was a plot twist that we all experienced collectively, and that was the beginning of the pandemic, the first couple months of 2020, March 2020. My sleep started to suffer again because of all the unknowns in the world. And I got worried that I would be going down that road of insomnia again. And I did not want to do that. So I started to research sleep. I got myself an Oura ring to track it. Mm-hmm. And in pretty short order, I got things straightened out with my sleep and was very grateful for that. And what I ended up doing is just sort of organically posting on Facebook, things that I was doing. And I came to find out during this time that a lot of other people in my circle were struggling with their sleep too. Mm-hmm. And so this got me really thinking about becoming a sleep coach. And it was just like, I knew that I had to do this. I had actually had breast cancer in 2018, which was a whole shift in my health trajectory. I changed everything about my health. And at that point, I knew I wanted to work with people to help them with their health, but I just didn't know how. And when this fascination with sleep crept up, I was just like, that's it. So that's when I decided to become a sleep coach, was at the end of 2020. Then went through all these certifications and courses and just really immersed myself in studying it. And here I am, still obsessed with it. obsessed with helping other people get better sleep.
I think that the people who have gone through something themselves tend to be more empathetic, and you know what it's like to go through that. And I think it's just especially valuable when you have had that lived experience yourself. It's not like you couldn't help people, but that is something that is so important. And it's a non-negotiable for me. Whenever I work with clients, that is the first lifestyle thing I want to focus on, because without sleep, it's going to affect, at least for me, my decision-making for the rest of the day. My appetite's different. I'm irritable. I don't look as great. That's important to me. I want to look and feel good. Most importantly, feel good. So I started to learn a little bit more about what sleep was doing for us and what types of beliefs as a coach do you hear from people that are getting in the way of them having high quality sleep. So an example might be, I'll sleep when I'm dead, or sleep makes me lazy. What types of things have you heard from either clients or just in general about why sleep is hard?
Yeah. So one of the things I hear a lot from a lot of people, clients and non-clients, or just people just that I meet, is they're very obsessed with hitting this 8-hour mark. That they're like, I need to get 8 hours of sleep. And as a sleep coach, I get targeted a lot of ads for products about sleep and things like that. And there's all this messaging out there about get your 8 hours. And so the National Sleep Foundation recommends 7 to 9 hours of sleep for adults 18 to 64. And so I think that 8, because it's in the middle, is the one that's always, honed in on. But the reality is that if you look at the National Sleep Foundation's guidelines, their recommendations, and you kind of look in the fine print, what you'll see is that they say 6 to 10 hours may be appropriate for some people. Mm-hmm. So that's a really wide range, 6 to 10 hours. And so what I really like to share with people when they're fixated on this number of 8 is that you can look at the hours of sleep need as more of like a calorie requirement, right? So if you, Ashley, if you're a really active person, you're going to require more calories than, say, a sedentary 80-year-old. Mm-hmm. So that sleep need is just extremely personal, and we all kind of have to find our own sleep need. And it may not be 8 hours. It may be 6 hours and 45 minutes. It may be 9 hours, but just kind of find out what's right for you and kind of ignore the pressure, because, this pressure for 8 hours especially gets problematic when people have insomnia and they really just cannot get 8 hours, and they start to get very worried. So I especially worry about those people when this messaging gets out there.
Yeah. So, I would agree. And I just pulled up my Oura ring. It says my average total sleep for the past 31 days is 8 hours and 28 minutes. So I'm someone who does require more sleep. If I do 6 hours multiple nights in a row, you're probably not going to get the best version of me, especially if you combine that with switching time zones. Mm. But, I agree, if you have insomnia or anything that you're trying to do and you put pressure on yourself, this is what it's supposed to be versus what's actually my need. And it's different for everyone, bio-individuality. That's why I love the Oura ring. You can fine tune. And maybe some people think that they're supposed to get 8. And if they sleep 8 hours and 28 minutes like I do, they'd feel guilty about that. And I think just listening to our body is going to make a big difference. So yeah, were there any other beliefs, like things that I've heard from clients where, oh, well, I just can't sleep. Like it's just not something that I can do. But if you say that, you're going to find evidence of why that's true. So what have the most challenging clients said to you about where they struggle with sleep or why they think it's not possible?
Yeah, I think what you said was really spot on, because we actually, sleep is a biological function, just like breathing is. Mm-hmm. We all have the ability to sleep, but sometimes things get in the way and we have challenges with it. And so often what I'll hear potential clients or clients say to me is, I'm a terrible sleeper. I'm awful. I never sleep. And, thoughts become things. So sometimes our languaging and our mindset around sleep perpetuates the fact that we're not sleeping well. So what I try to do with my clients is really address those maladaptive sleep beliefs and mindsets from the start. Right? Mm-hmm. To try to get them to change maybe the way they're speaking about themselves. Instead of saying, I'm a terrible sleeper, you could shift that and say, I'm having some challenges with sleep right now, but I'm confident I can get my sleep back on track where it used to be. So there's a difference between, like, you don't want to have like this, I'm the best sleeper ever. Like, you're not going to do affirmations like that, because that's almost like kind of like toxic positivity, right? We don't want to like say things aren't true, but we want to like shift that verbiage into more helpful language for us.
Absolutely. So that's such a great example. If you said, I sleep, well, you could say a certain amount. I sleep 9 hours a night and wake up feeling refreshed. If that's not true for you, don't say it. But what you could say, listen to the story that you're telling yourself about anything. This isn't just for sleep. But if you continue to tell yourself that you have trouble sleeping, that is the message you're reinforcing. And really, the subconscious mind is so underestimated as far as how we're showing up. So I tell people, clients, if they have a belief that says, I'm not a good sleeper, I would ask them if a reframe is something they're open to. And I would say something like, I am currently, or I have tended to struggle with my sleep, and I'm learning how I can improve this. It just gives the brain the possibility. And without that possibility, our subconscious will likely talk us out of it. And then we might have all these great habits and things we can do, but if we don't believe that they're going to get us there, it's unlikely that we'll continue with it. So I really wanted to mention that first. Ask yourself if you have any beliefs that are telling you it's hard.
Yeah.
And I've struggled with sleep. It obviously sounds like you have too. And we have learned how to find a way that works for us. And it's different for everybody. So if you do struggle with it, then we'll share some things that we both have learned. But just giving yourself that message that it's possible. You just haven't figured out how to get it yet for you.
And another thing is, for anyone out there who's listening, who's a parent, be really careful about how you term your child as a sleeper, because I think a lot of times adults term themselves as bad sleepers because their mama told them they were a bad sleeper.
Yeah.
So just be, if you're a parent, just be mindful of the languaging that you use to describe your child sleeping, because those little ears, they're going to pick up on it, and they may just kind of internalize that label.
Yep. We do it for so many things. So, okay, in sleep, let's say I come to you, I've got insomnia and I'm really struggling. Would you prioritize a consistent bedtime or a consistent wake time? And if you would pick one of those, maybe you wouldn't, but why or why not?
Yeah. So I would definitely prioritize a consistent wake time for anybody, insomnia or not, because that consistent wake time is really, really solidifying and entraining your circadian rhythm. And so what ends up happening is, if you pick a consistent wake time every day, okay, it's not just the days that you're working. It's like, because your body and brain don't know the difference between, the days that you're off work and not. So what ends up happening is, when you pick that solid wake up time, that consistent wake up time, you will automatically become sleepy around 16 hours later, right? So your sleep pressure builds up. This pressure called adenosine builds up, and you get to the point where you're sleepy enough that you want to sleep. So that morning consistent wake up time is really just an anchor to kind of set the stage for when you'll be sleepy that night. So as far as bedtime goes, I really kind of look at it as more like having an hour window of a bedtime versus like a strict, you must get into bed every night at 10 p.m.
Okay.
Because, what if you're not exactly sleepy at 10 p.m., right? You might be if you've had your consistent wake up time, but there's, if you haven't had a lot of activity, for example, one day, you may not be as sleepy that night, right? And so you may just extend your bedtime window a little bit until you become sleepy. But it's that morning anchored wake up time that is so, so critical for our circadian entrainment.
I'm glad that you mentioned training and entrainment. So that's the thing. We have to potty train. We have to, in some cases, sleep train. Some people don't do that. Whatever's right for you. But the point here is training. And we don't think of it that way. Oh, I tried it one time. Why don't I feel that way? Because I've lived my life for decades, possibly, doing things a certain way, and we have to retrain ourselves. That is not an overnight, pun intended, process. It's going to take some time. So staying consistent, celebrating your wins. I think having daily accountability with the Oura ring has been so helpful for me, because then I can see the days where I prioritize winding down before bed, how my sleep quality is on days where I eat a heavy meal or a bunch of ice cream before bed, what that does to my sleep. So having that daily feedback allows me to reflect what I did the past 24 hours or right before bed and improve that. But it is a training process. So be patient with yourself and realize that it takes time. So let's say I've been dealing with insomnia for 10 years. What's a reasonable amount of time? Would you say months to give myself to really feel in that new rhythm?
Yeah, I would say probably if you've had insomnia for 10 years, you're probably looking at maybe months to turn that around. It could be sooner, but it's really interesting, Ashley, because everyone is so unique. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard to pinpoint exactly how long it'll take. But the general principle is the longer you've had insomnia, probably the longer it will take to build in new habits and behaviors that will de-escalate your insomnia.
Yeah. And it can feel really frustrating, especially if you're sleep deprived. So I try to think about it, 1% a day. If I'm just getting better, don't compare yourself to somebody else, compare yourself to you and where you were, and if you're doing a better job. So what are some of the things that you have learned to prioritize? And then we'll talk about the things to avoid. So I guess I can start with prioritizing. Yeah. What would you say? And then I'll fill in the gaps there.
Yeah. So I think there are a few things that I think are like really super critical about lifestyle changes and habits. So the first thing I would say would be really managing your light and dark. And what I mean by that is having bright days and dark nights. If you remember nothing else from this podcast, just remember bright days and dark nights, because I think so often we get it backwards and we have like dim days and really bright nights. You're raising your hand because you know what that's like, having been in a hospital working. So really think about in the morning when you get up, getting natural daylight exposure as soon as you can. So ideally within the first hour is going outside for about 15 minutes, maybe 30 if it's overcast, not having your sunglasses, which is critical because I'm seeing so many people in my neighborhood walking their dogs alongside me, wearing their sunglasses. And I'm like, no. And the reason why is because when that natural sunlight hits our retina, it sends a signal to our suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is our circadian pacemaker. And that basically sends this signal and cascade to reshuffle some hormones and neurotransmitters. So any residual melatonin from the night before is shut off, your serotonin boost for better mood, your cortisol boost for more energy. And then it also prepares your melatonin production for the following night. So all of these really, really great things are happening when you're having your eyes exposed. So basically when you have sunglasses on, you're depriving your body of all those benefits. So, and then if you are able to take breaks during the day to step outside and get some more daylight, that's even better. And then in the evening, we really want to mimic what's going on outside. So after dinner, you may want to start dimming your lights. So if you have bright overhead lights, shut those off maybe or dim them and turn on table lights. Or if you have red lights, that's kind of like next level, light management. Just because we really want a large contrast between our lights in the day and night to really entrain our circadian rhythms. So, and then we kind of covered this earlier, but I just think it's worth repeating because it's been so critical in helping my clients is that consistent sleep-wake schedule and just keeping that regularity. They actually did a study. This is really interesting. They found that women who had 90 minutes or more of inconsistency or like leeway with their sleep-wake time, they tended to have higher body fat than women who kept their sleep-wake window at 60 minutes or less. Which is
that
really
is very interesting. Yeah.
So if you're concerned about weight management, you may want to be extra, taking caution with the regularity of your sleep-wake cycle.
This is a little bit of a tangent, but I just talked to someone about a coaching program that I participated in 2017. I had to eat a very strict diet, send photos of it. I had to weigh myself every day, do an hour of cardio, fasted, by the way, because it was at like 4:30 before I went into the hospital and I wasn't sleeping. And I actually gained a ton of weight. And there was no part of me back then that would have thought sleep is necessary for losing weight. I just know that it's important and I feel better when I do it. but I thought I was doing all the right things because I was cutting calories and I was upping the movement. And in fact, my body held on to everything and I gained 30 pounds. So I think that's really important. People might say, once again, the beliefs, I'll sleep when I'm dead, but there's so much happening during sleep. So we'll get into that in a second. But just to recap what you said, consistent wake time, totally agree. And that's why we've both said it multiple times. And then eventually you might have a consistent sleep time, but it sounds like roughly within an hour window seems to be what you would recommend. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Morning light, dimming lights at night, and just bright days, dark nights.
Yes.
I would also say things that I would recommend, something that's calming in the last 30 minutes of the day, because our subconscious mind, going back to that, it's going to be marinating in our subconscious all night. So probably not when I want to read about current events or what's going on in the world or something like that.
Absolutely.
So not being stressed before bed, but that's more on the avoid list. So what do you think are some of the mistakes or things that people should avoid when they are prioritizing high quality sleep?
Yeah. So I think they want to avoid alcohol for one. That's like a huge sleep barrier. So it's actually the most commonly used sleep aid in the world.
Yeah.
And no surprise, because it actually does, since it relaxes us, it's, acts as a sedative. It does help us get to sleep faster in many cases. But the problem is that it makes our sleep fragmented. It cuts off the first couple REM cycles of our sleep, which is the cycle that's important for emotional regulation and memory consolidation. And then toward the end of the night, you get lots of wake ups, either to go to the bathroom or your blood sugar gets dysregulated. So I would say that, not to say you have to cut out alcohol from your life, point blank, but just be mindful of your alcohol and when you're consuming it. So for my clients who definitely want to continue using alcohol, what I suggest for them is to think about happy hour versus nightcap, right? So have a glass or two of wine at like maybe 5 o'clock, and then cutting yourself off from alcohol at least 3 hours before bed, right? Instead of just drinking like at, after dinner. I mean, I've done these tests on myself with my Oura ring, Ashley, and I can clearly see that, if I've had a glass of wine at 4:30, it has minimal impact. But if I had it at 8 o'clock, there's trouble ahead. It's big trouble ahead.
Same thing. Yeah. I've noticed the same.
Yeah. So that's a big one. And I think it's actually one that can be the easiest to modify with that knowledge. I would also say eating late at night, like we're having a heavy dinner, can be really detrimental. And again, something I've seen in my own Oura ring scores. So really building in like a 3-hour window between having your last meal and bedtime, because given a choice, your body is going to choose digestion over sleep. So trying to keep your meal fairly light. There's a lot of data showing that the Mediterranean diet can be fairly sleep promoting. So if you're thinking about the Mediterranean diet, that's got a lot of, good fats, high protein and high fiber. So think about those things. Probably one of the worst things you could eat, for dinner would be like an extra cheese pizza with pepperoni on it, because it's just a lot of saturated fat. So that would probably be fairly disruptive to your sleep. Could potentially give you heartburn. Because
it's a very heavy meal.
It's a heavy meal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else that you would avoid that comes to mind?
So, you kind of touched on it earlier, but like a lot of stimulating things like media, you want to, I'm not like a huge stickler about screens, but I think that we really want to be cognizant of what we're consuming on a screen. So I like to look at active media versus passive media. So if you're going to be on a screen an hour before bed, think about more of like passive media. So passive media would be like meditation and breathwork apps. It would be TV, because TV is passive. The active ones would be texting people, social media, gaming. So those are all activating your brain. And that's not what you want before bed. So I mentioned TV, this is an interesting little sidebar here. A lot of people are very surprised that I use TV as my wind down routine as a sleep coach. They're like, isn't that against sleep hygiene? Well, the thing is, is that it personally relaxes me. I get sleepy when I watch TV, right? And so what I do though, to mitigate any issues with watching it, is I watch it on an actual TV. I don't use a laptop and hold it up against like on my lap where it's close to my face. I also use blue light blocking glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And I choose content that is not stimulating. It's like, easy comedies, food shows, decor shows. Nothing's going to be terribly upsetting. So I think it's just really important that if you're going to watch TV or do Netflix, just be really mindful of what you're watching. Because that, like you said, that stuff that is happening right before bed can follow you into bed, right? So you don't want to have, the worst stuff on the news in your head right as you're going to bed.
Yes. Yeah. And some things that I would add, just from what I've learned, if I eat a big meal before bed, then I'm actually more likely to have my blood sugar drop in the middle of the night, in addition to a higher resting heart rate before bed. And I made a post on Instagram not too long ago, and it's look for these 4 trends about your resting heart rate during the night. And ideally, we want it to be in a hammock shape. So resting heart rate a little bit higher, because, we just are shutting down for the night, at its lowest at the midpoint of our sleep cycle. And then it goes up right before we wake up. But if your heart rate is really high and then it goes down, it'll show you what your body is trying to tell you, what that data is representing is going on in the body. So, we want to measure sleep as hours slept, or we want to measure nutrition as calories consumed. But I think there's more to it. So just like sleep, yeah, it's great to sleep my 8.5 hours, but am I spending enough time in each stage? Do they all do something? Kind of like, yeah, it's great to eat however many calories, but are you getting the macronutrients that you need? So there are just these nuances that sometimes we miss on social media. And so big meals before bed, that is always going to drop my blood sugar in the middle of the night, as well as have a higher resting heart rate, which affects my readiness score the next day and my sleep quality. Alcohol, I would agree on that. I'm not a big drinker, but I think I heard from Dr. Michael Bruce. Let's say you're going to have 3 drinks and you go to bed at 9 p.m., finish those 3 drinks 3 hours before bed. So by 6, thought that was interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
And then also avoiding stimulating things. As far as blue blockers, I am religious about wearing them at night. I use raw optics. However, during the day, I don't wear them unless I'm inside in front of a screen. So do you wear blue blockers if you wake up before the sun comes up?
No. So I have a pair of glasses that have yellow tint. So they're blocking out sun blue. And I wear them during the day. My puppy ate them, which is why I'm not wearing them now. So a new pair is on the way. But right now I'm wearing like cheapies from Amazon, which aren't good, but you do what you do. So, I put those on during the day when I'm using the computer to reduce eye strain and headaches. But then once night hits, I put on the red ones, the serious ones, the alien ones. And I don't care what I look like. But I mean, I even took them to the hospital when I had my mastectomy, because I knew about the hospital lights. And I'm like, I might look like a total dork, but I'm going to sit here in the recovery bed after my surgery. I'm not going to ruin my circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
I was just so dead set. So yeah, I am a proponent of wearing them because there's no downside. There's no downside to wearing the glasses. And actually, I think there's an Oura blog post a while ago. It said that their users reported 9% less wake time, which, is an interesting statistic.
Blue blockers?
Yeah, wearing the blue blockers.
And I think they studied it with raw optics, right?
They might have.
I think
so. Whooped recently had a podcast where they said people who wore blue blockers had a higher recovery score, like 8% higher recovery score. So there is some data pointing to the fact that it's better for us to wear them. And, interestingly, they did a study with people who had insomnia where they had them wear blue light blocking glasses 2 hours before bed for a week. And they found that subjectively and objectively, their sleep measures were better. So I thought that was really interesting.
It's a week.
It's a week. Yeah.
Amazing.
So again, to me, there is no downside. I mean, it's, they're not cheap. The good ones aren't cheap. The brand that you wear, the brand that I wear, they're not cheap. But it's an investment that's going to last. Hopefully your puppy won't chew yours like they did mine. But, once you've got them, you've got them.
Exactly.
And if you take care of them. but I think it's a wise investment. If you've got a certain amount of dollars to spend on your sleep optimization, that's probably a good place to spend your money.
Yeah, light's huge. And we really underestimate the power of that. And then also waking up and looking at our screens. I mean, not only on a light perspective, is that not good for our circadian rhythm, but it's just very stimulating and we're not easing into our day. So
Yes.
I think it's really important to be intentional how we start our day, how we end our day. And then sleep environment. So for me, I want my bedroom to be a place only for sleep and sex. So there aren't family photos. I try not to have piles of laundry or just like anything in the room that would be stressful. I like a monochromatic look anyway. I'm kind of boring in that sense, but it's tranquil. I like a sanctuary feel. We don't have a TV in our bedroom. We have a projector, which bounces light off the wall, and I'll still wear my blue blockers for that. So I also watch TV before bed, but I think there are ways to do it. So my sleep environment, we keep the blinds down and it's enough. We don't need blackout curtains. So I can get some light in the morning and I just wake up with that. I have a door. I can go right outside. And that's the thing, like our phones, none of these things are bad. We're not even saying you can't drink alcohol, but just question the timing of when you're doing these things.
Yes.
And that's a simple shift that we could make. So how important is sleep environment, and what would you include if there's anything that I missed out on there?
Yeah, so that was a good recap. So the way that I try to talk about the sleep environment is you want to look at your bedroom like a cave, right? So caves are cool, dark, and quiet. So when you think about temperature and being cool, there's not like one specific temperature, but 65 to 68 tends to be kind of a sweet spot for a lot of people. Having cooling sheets, cooling pajamas, if you wear pajamas, bamboo fabric has been, a godsend for me. Like I'm a perimenopausal woman and, I haven't had a hot flash yet or a night sweat, but I'm sleeping hotter, per my Oura ring, and having things like that are helpful. Next level investment are the cooling mattress pads,
Yes.
Again, a game changer for me. And so that covers the coolness, the darkness. Blackout curtains are great. They're a little pricey, but they're a good investment if there's a lot of light coming into your room. You can also do an eye mask, which is great. They've got a lot of really good organic cotton ones that are very comfortable. I put one in my suitcase because I never know if the Airbnb or the hotel room is going to have a lot of light coming in. And then with noise, a lot of people like just silence, which is fine. But for people who are light sleepers, even if they're silent, there can be a random noise, a dog barks or a car, an ambulance or what. You really can't control that outside environment. So I'm a big fan of white noise machines. And the ones that just have steady noise. There's a little bit of an issue with music and some of the like nature sounds, because what you don't want is a lot of inconsistency. You don't want like things stopping and starting, because that can actually cause little micro awakenings. So you want something really consistent, whatever that noise is. So, I'm a big fan of the kind of sanctuary look for your bedroom, neutrals, having minimal things, and not a lot of clutter, not having work in your bedroom. Like there are people though, who are in studio apartments and they're like, well, how do I not have work in my bedroom when I only have one room? And the solution to that is just to maybe get a little partition.
Yes. I had a studio and that helped me a lot. Yeah.
So there are little fixes that you can get to work around that. But I would say, during the pandemic, a lot of people made their bedroom their office. They'd work in bed. I mean, it just blurs the lines between work and, the rest of your life. So I definitely urge people to like work in another room.
Yes.
Really try to avoid electronics in your bedroom if you can. I always urge my clients to sleep with their phone outside of their bedroom.
That helps me a lot. Otherwise, I'm too tempted.
Yeah, the temptation is so great to just reach for it if you can't sleep. So yeah, those are kind of my, bedroom kind of guidelines or suggestions.
Okay. So, we both have an Oura ring, and something that you have told me about is something called Evie, which is a different type of sleep tracker ring. So it's not out yet, but you're going to be learning about that. So if anyone's interested, follow Morgan on Instagram and she'll share more about it. But why do you think having that data is so helpful? What are you looking for when you're looking at your sleep data too?
Yeah. So I've started actually looking a lot more at my recovery data,
Okay.
because how I feel in the morning tends to be based more on my recovery data than my sleep data.
Okay.
And so recovery is like, heart rate and HRV, temperature, breath rate. And with the sleep side of it, I'm looking at just kind of everything. I mean, there's even a new with Oura, the stress tracking
It's amazing.
feature. It's pretty cool.
I think it's so cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting development. And I really do like sleep trackers. I think they're great for people who can look at data and then make changes based on their data, like behavioral changes. That's like the perfect candidate for somebody for a sleep tracker. But there are people out there, and I've met many of them, who become more anxious about their sleep when they have a tracker.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who I work with have insomnia, and it makes their anxiety about their sleep go through the roof, because what they'll do is they'll be like, oh my gosh, I only got like this amount of REM or this amount of deep, and this is going to be terrible for me. And they just start into a spiral.
Yeah.
So people like that, I kind of just say, hey, let's just do a paper. Let's just do a sleep journal, a diary that's on paper. And we're just tracking, behavioral things and sleep time and so forth. Another thing that people can do if they are getting too wrapped up into the data every day is wear it all the time and then check it once a week to look at trends.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of focusing on the daily things, you're really looking at trends.
Yes.
Right. And every so often I'll take out my Oura Ring dashboard, and I've been using it since early 2020. And I'll look to see, the trends. And I'm like, kind of proud of myself that my trends have gone. I mean, I'm aging, I'm 53, and my sleep hasn't I've done a lot of things to really optimize my sleep so that it's improving over time. Right. And so I think it's kind of interesting to look at the long-term data to see what's going on and how you've changed your habits over time.
I think that's a really good point, because for me, the way I look at it is the data doesn't change the reality of what's happening. And if anything, if I see terrible data, then I'm going to have so much more compassion for myself. I'm going to say, okay, I don't need to be pushing it. I am going to be gentle with myself and only compare yourself to yourself. So that's a great tip, because you can keep the Oura Ring on airplane mode for up to a week, I believe, and the battery will last. Is it 5 days, 7 days with the Gen 3?
Somewhere around there.
Okay. So you'd be able to see without getting that data, but look at your trends. And if they're not great, the way that I look at it is, well, you have something that you can work with. And then one day you'll look back and remember how you felt with that data, and you'll be able to compare it. So if you're wanting a quick fix, think about learning your trends, very subtle things over time, and it makes a big difference. So some things that the Oura Ring does track would be total sleep time, efficiency, restfulness, which I believe has a lot to do with how much we're moving around. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
REM sleep, deep sleep, latency, meaning how long does it take for you to fall asleep once you get in bed, and just the overall timing. So it's going to give you a score on that. It also looks at your oxygen saturation when you're sleeping. And like I said, there's a graph that shows your lowest heart rate when that's happening. And it's just really cool feedback. So I'm not against alcohol. It's like I said, it's not my favorite thing, but on the days where I have it, I'm so grateful to see that data, even though it's not great data. It's like, that's just feedback. Now I can visualize how this thing is affecting me. And it just allows me to make better choices because I can tangibly see it. Sleep, stress, these things are hard for people to prioritize sometimes because you can't see it in a tangible way, but in this way, you can. So I think that's pretty cool. Okay, so REM sleep and deep sleep. Typically, we want to have a certain amount of each. And my understanding is that deep sleep is very important for the lymphatic system. It's when our brain is emptying all these toxins. And that happens when we're in deep sleep, usually towards the end of the night. REM sleep is when we're dreaming, but can you fill in the gaps a little bit? If someone is new to REM sleep versus deep sleep, what do they do for us? Why are they important?
Sure. So percentage wise, we would expect probably 15 to 20% deep sleep for, normal healthy sleepers. The deep sleep happens in the first half of the night, typically. That's where the biggest chunk is.
Okay.
And when you think about deep sleep, that is when what you said, the lymphatic system is working. That's sort of like the process. It's almost like a car wash for your brain.
Yes.
You're getting that wringing out of those toxins. And they actually found out about the lymphatic system like 10 years ago. So this is like a new discovery. Seems kind of mind-boggling, literally. And so, yes, with deep sleep, you're looking at more of the bodily repair. Okay. And with REM sleep, the percentages are typically like 20 to 25% for a normal, healthy adult. And the REM phase usually happens toward the end of the night. You get a lot of REM sleep in the early morning, which is why we wake up and we remember our dreams, because we're probably dreaming in our REM phase. Mm-hmm. And our REM phase is really more about the mind and emotional regulation and memory consolidation. But they're both really, really important. So like I don't think that one is better than the other, but they have to kind of there's got to be sort of a nice regulation or a balance is what I'm trying to say. They have to be balanced. So you don't want like 8% deep sleep and like 30% REM. You want to kind of have them somewhat close together. And sleep trackers are not 100% accurate with the staging. So we kind of have to keep that in mind as we look at our data and realize it's not going to be like 100% accurate. But Oura did an algorithm update recently that makes it a little bit more accurate. In fact, if you look at when I looked at my trends recently, it was like I jumped off a cliff because my deep sleep was so high according to their old algorithm. And with a new algorithm, it was a lot lower. And I was just like, at first, like really confused until I saw this little note saying the algorithm changed. I was like, okay, my sleep did just go off a cliff. So
that messed with me a little bit too.
Yeah.
So they do different things, but they're very important. And let's say going back to weight loss, I'm struggling to lose weight. How is sleep going to affect my hormones, leptin, ghrelin?
Yes.
How does that relate to not only overall health, but hunger and weight loss?
Yeah. So when we are not getting enough sleep and we're sleep deprived, our hunger hormones get dysregulated. So we have a hormone called ghrelin. And I think of this as the gremlin. It's the hunger hormone. So just imagine that hunger monster. And then leptin is our satiety hormone. So we don't have enough of that. So it's like the perfect storm. You've got too much appetite and not enough of that kind of self-control saying, hey, I don't want those chips. We tend to crave high sugar food. Like we want a quick energy hit because our bodies are craving that. So we're going to make choices that are not great for us, basically designed out of the way our brain is functioning and our hunger hormone. So it's really, it's really not our fault. If you look at it, it's not like we're bad people. We've got no willpower. Our bodies and brains are just basically saying, hey, I need some assistance here. Come help me. So if you are the kind of person who is under a lot of sleep deprivation and your hunger hormones are out of balance, it's very likely that you might find yourself putting on weight. Or if you're trying to lose weight, your weight loss efforts are stunted because your hormones are dysregulated. So for anybody who is, trying to lose weight, they really need to take a good look at how their sleep is to see if that's their barrier, because it very could well be their barrier of losing weight.
Definitely. And the body's going to prioritize things. And just like you said, rest, it's not rest and digest, it's rest or digest. And that will take away from our body's ability to fully sleep and do the processes that it needs to do because it's digesting. So just pay attention to how you feel, whether you have an Oura ring or not. Just pay attention on the nights where you eat a big meal before bed, how that affects your sleep. If you drink right before bed, how that affects your sleep. And the more that you can notice your own trends, that's where you can make your own shifts. It makes a big difference. And all these things relate to each other. I've done podcasts with other people on blood sugar, but it relates to sleep. All these things are connected. And we don't live in harmony with nature. So a circadian lifestyle, I'm really passionate about that. It sounds like you are too. And that's really how we can give ourselves that foundation so that the body has what it needs to thrive. It's kind of like if you only ate fat, it needs protein and carbs for other things. So if you're sleeping, but you're not getting everything that you need, it will take away from the body's ability to show up in other ways. So that's the first thing I recommend people start with on their health journey, as far as physical things they can change. Before I'm changing, adding some strenuous workout routine, we want to make sure that you are sleeping and that you're able to repair. I think in our American society, most people are hitting the override button, go, go, go. And even just slowing down in restorative time is hard for people. So, it's just something to think about. And when you have improved your sleep, when you've worked with clients who have improved their sleep, and I'll speak for myself, but what has that done for their health, their outlook, and their quality of life by prioritizing high quality sleep?
Oh, yeah. It's really interesting to see what ends up happening once their sleep gets dialed in. Because what I'm finding is that they have more energy during the day. They have better mood. Their relationships are better. They become more attuned to what their goals are. Boundary setting often improves. So it's like there's a lot of really interesting side effects, if you will, of getting better sleep that I don't think a lot of people realize. Because, some of the clients that I see, they've had poor sleep for so long, that's just like their norm, right? And when they have that kind of veil lifted over them, they're like, wow, this is what life can really be like. It's really cool to see.
Yeah. And especially after working night shift for many years, and the IARC, International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is part of the WHO, World Health Organization, says that night shift is a group 2A probable carcinogen, long-term night shift work, and increased risk of breast cancer due to the disruption of the body's natural circadian rhythm. This is very mainstream. So, I have to say that when I worked in the hospital, it's a lot of do as I say, not as I do, because we're not modeling managing our stress when we're running around like a chicken with our head cut off or eating our meals very quickly with alarms in the background. Right. Like, it's just something that I wish we could be better leaders, but the environment is a little bit challenging there, but it's really, really important. So people say, oh, I'm missing out on time for other things, but how I feel is more, I'm a quality over quantity type of person. How I feel is the most important thing. And my mental health has been significantly better when I make this a non-negotiable. So yeah, I don't know. What's the biggest change that you've noticed by having better sleep? For me, it's more stable mood.
I think that probably would be the case for me too. And just better focus, problem solving, resolving conflict. I think that has been a big one, like flying off the handle. Like I rarely do that anymore just because my sleep is so dialed in. I mean, I have a bad night every now and again because that's part of the human experience, but sure. I just remember when I had full insomnia 18 years ago and life was really challenging. Relationships were challenging. Work was really challenging. I had a job where I was in charge of writing very quick, like PR releases. And I had the hangover from Ambien the night before. And I would just sit at my keyboard, like fuzzy headed as all get out. People were mad at me at work because I couldn't produce fast enough because of the Ambien hangover. So yeah, I mean, life is runs more smoothly when your sleep is dialed in on all levels.
So you do coffee enemas, right?
I used to.
Is there a reason why you don't anymore?
Well, honestly, I restarted them because of one of your posts last couple years ago. And I think there was just something wrong with the apparatus that I was using. And it squirted like coffee all over the bathroom. I was like, F it. I just got really frustrated at the time with it. And I was just like, okay, I'm just going to put this on pause for a while. But I mean, I think they're great. Maybe one day I'll start again.
Okay. The reason I ask is because if I drink caffeine, for me, hard limit, no caffeine past 12. I don't really drink a lot by mouth. I prefer like cacao or something like that in a morning beverage after I've had my protein-rich breakfast. But coffee enemas, when we consume caffeine rectally, it's taken in by the hepatic portal system and it goes through several times, about every 3 minutes or so. And drinking coffee puts us in a very sympathetic state. And that's why I had to give it up when I was trying to get my body back in balance in 2018. However, I was doing coffee enemas. And so people hear coffee, they think stimulant. It actually is able to get us into the parasympathetic mode, which I think is interesting. And it puts pressure on the vagus nerve, which is also very interesting. So that's one thing I can do before bed. And I find that it does not in any way interfere with my sleep. If anything, it's kind of like helpful. But everyone's different. And I've even heard with red light that some people causes them to feel more awake. So one size doesn't fit all. But when you did do coffee enemas, did you find that they got in the way of your sleep? And everyone's different.
They didn't. Well, so I always did my coffee enemas first thing in the morning, or like, before 8 or 9. So yeah, that was just part of my routine. I'm a morning routine kind of gal. And interesting that you do. I guess the thing that I would wonder, I guess this doesn't happen to you, but I would think that maybe the enema wouldn't be complete and I would have to get up and go to the bathroom again at night. But I guess you feel complete and you don't need to get up and go. Oh, good.
Yeah. I mean, once I go, some people like to stay, on the toilet for a long time. But for me, I'm like, just comes right out. I stay maybe 3 minutes or something. But as always, it's different for everybody. So if someone is wanting natural supplements for sleep, I can't say what's going to be right for somebody else. I can just share things that have helped me, but just because something is helpful doesn't mean it's right for you. It could actually be completely inappropriate. But for me, GABA has been a godsend. I also take Trinquenil from Premier Research Labs. That's got valerian root, passion flower. It doesn't have anything that's habit forming. So I like that occasionally. And I do take the Sandman suppositories, which are very high dose melatonin with glutathione from Mitozen. I don't take that every night, more so like when I'm traveling, full moon, if I really need it, but I'll have the best sleep scores ever. Not a fan of melatonin by mouth. What are some things that you've seen that have been helpful for people? And we're not saying a supplement or a medication is here to replace the lifestyle and the winding down and having your room be a sanctuary and thinking about the temperature and the light and all that. But if someone does want a supplement, are there any that you think are worth looking into and asking their provider about?
Yeah. So, I agree with what you said with like, you have to really dial in the lifestyle things. And I think that's critical to get the behavioral things down and then add a supplement on top of that. With the people that I work with who have anxious types of insomnia, supplements are not particularly helpful as a rule. But for people who are, wanting to optimize their sleep, or they're just having a kind of a stretch of bad sleep, I think supplements are fine. They're just, the problem is that the market is so saturated with so many. I mean, as a sleep coach, I'm getting targeted all these ads constantly. And I look them up, and occasionally friends will send me a sleep supplement. Oh, this worked like a charm. And I'll look it up and it looks fine, but it's just so bio-individual. It's just what works for you may not work for me. I have not experimented with tons of supplements only because, in my experimentations, nothing really seemed to move the needle because I was like looking at the Oura scores. But I started having early morning awakenings because of perimenopause. And I heard a few podcast interviews with this woman named Dr. Deanna Minnick from Symphony Natural Health. And she started talking about Herbatonin, which is a plant melatonin. And my ears perked up. And she was just talking about how it helped her with early morning awakenings and anecdotally with other people she'd known. And I went online and ordered some of that. And it has helped me a lot. Like I would say, reduce my early morning awakenings by like 75%.
Amazing. And one size doesn't fit all, but it's just great to know that there could be things that are not pharmaceuticals that can help people fill in the gaps, but you've got to do the foundations.
Yes.
And we don't want to wind down. A lot of us stay really busy, so we don't have to feel. That's been me for a long time. And it's a practice though. It's practicing slowing down. So maybe an hour of winding down and not being on something very stimulating might be too much for people. Okay, start with 30 minutes, start with 15. But what are you doing in that time? Like, what are some approved activities? I would say tub, red light, sex, journaling, reading a book, maybe even TV, as long as it's something that's relaxing and you've got blue blockers. But what are things that you recommend that people do during that wind down time?
Yeah, all the things you said: reading, journaling, meditating, breath work, conversation. But you have to get a little bit careful with the conversation, because if you're having a conversation with your partner and you're touching on subjects that are triggering, you don't want to go there before bed. I think we've all had the experience of having a fight with our partner before bed, and it affects your sleep. Like, let's face it, affects your sleep. So I would say, try to keep the conversations, veer them in a direction you want them to go in. Save the heavy stuff for the morning,
Yes. Yes.
So, I think there's just with evening routines, it's really, I think, what works for you, but just anything relaxing that you find relaxing and non-stimulating. I definitely, when I'm working with people who have insomnia, try to help them understand that it shouldn't be a checklist that actually makes them more anxious. Like there's like some kind of performance sort of mindset about the routine for some people. So we really try to work to get their mindset in a place where they're not feeling like, I've got to get this, like they're running around with a chicken with their head cut off, trying to do their evening routine. That's not the way it should be. You may not even really do much of anything. You might just kind of just sit there and kind of read a book. And that might be it for you. I think reading is actually probably one of the better things, as long as you're not reading something that's like going to keep you up, like that's going to be so engaging that you just keep reading chapter after chapter. I've had clients do that and they're like, reading was a fail. Reading was a fail. And I'm like, well, I think you need different content, probably.
Okay. So all of those things, I would say, I don't know if we mentioned Epsom salt baths, but even if you don't have a full tub, I have a crock pot. I don't really cook that much and it's ceramic. So I put boiling water in, I add some cool water, do about 2 to 3 cups of Epsom salt, and I get it through my feet. I feel like I took drugs, like in the best way possible. So I think that's something that a lot of people could benefit from. We know how prevalent magnesium deficiencies are. It's important for hundreds of bodily functions. So it is another thing that we can do that is very relaxing, I find.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Or even like a foot soak can be, because they've shown that warm baths and showers cool your core body temperature, right? So we want that cool core body temperature before bed. And if you don't want to do like a bath or a shower, a foot soak can actually be a good stand-in for that.
Okay, so I always thought it was warm body, cool room. So you're saying you want a cool core temperature? Could you break that one down for me?
So when you do a warm bath or shower, what happens is it's kind of counterintuitive. The heat escapes from your extremities and cools your core.
I see. Okay.
You get the coolness that way. So you definitely want the cool environment. And then if you want kind of that extra boost of coolness, you can do the warm bath or shower, maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours before bed.
Okay. That makes sense. So you would still agree with warm body, cool room?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Warm extremities, so you could wear socks to bed. That actually helps cool your core. It's keeping the heat kind of in your core. But you don't want your body to be too warm before bed. But it's all, I have clients who like to heat up their cooling mattress pad before they go to bed, whereas I like to have it really cold when I go to bed and then warm up later. So sometimes you just have to kind of play around and see what works for you.
Yeah. And it's different for everybody. I cannot sleep with socks on and I can't sleep with my feet under the cover. So I like the room very cold. And I usually don't sleep with clothes on. It just depends, but I'm trying to, but I'm sleeping with a castor oil pack. And so I need like a t-shirt or something just so it doesn't, leak out in any way. But I do not like to have my feet covered. So that's very interesting. And I also am not a big mouth taper because I use tallow and it just doesn't stick. But what would be the benefits of mouth taping? I believe you're a fan of it. And I think I've heard that it can be really great because if you're a mouth breather, that can affect our facial structure, a lot of different things. And we can be more prone to cavities because the mouth is dry. But separately from those two reasons, why would you tape your mouth at night? What advantage would that offer?
It seems like when you are taping your mouth, your breathing gets a little bit slower. So you're kind of getting more into that parasympathetic state.
Okay.
But what you said actually about the mouth tape benefits is actually true. I would say, though, that use with caution because you want to make sure that you're able to breathe through your nose, right? And people with sleep apnea need to get screened and treated for sleep apnea. So I would say if you're going to try to use mouth tape, use it during the day for a couple hours just to make sure that you can breathe through your nose and that you don't have a lot of anxiety about it.
Yes.
I just find that when I wake up without mouth tape, there've been a couple of times when I've traveled and I haven't had it with me. My mouth is just really dry and my throat feels kind of crackly, and I just feel better overall. But again, it's something that you need to test for yourself, and make sure it's okay for you.
Yeah. And let's say you have some trauma where someone put a hand over your mouth when you're sleeping, probably not going to work for you.
Right. Exactly.
So for me, I don't do it, but I have some, and I don't think I gave it a fair go either. Once again, I use towel on my face so it doesn't stick, but Somnifix was the company I used. Is there one that you recommend?
Gosh.
Or do you just use paper tape?
Well, I've gone through a few. It's called VOX. Oh gosh, it's like basically it's like bright blue and it looks like a little cross or like a little H.
Oh, I've seen that. Okay.
And they're really great people. It's like VIO2 or something like that.
Okay.
That's good, but there are a lot out there. I just bought actually a really cheapo brand on Amazon. It's like, I don't even know the name of it, but it was just like very cheap and it works because I'm like, well, if I can save a little money on mouth tape, I'm going to.
Okay. So 2 last questions that I want to touch on would be the concept of feeling safe when we're sleeping. Because when I was younger, in the middle of the night, when I would stay at certain friends' houses, someone would come in and wake me up. And I've always kind of struggled to feel like I can fully sleep. So I have to have the door locked. For face and aging, this is the High Maintenance Hippie podcast. It's better to sleep on your back versus on your side because that can pull more on one side of the face. But a lot of people don't feel safe sleeping on their back, and they just feel more comfortable laying on their side. So what would you say about sleep position? What would be ideal? And how important is feeling safe when we're sleeping?
Yeah, well, feeling sleep while we're sleeping is paramount to falling asleep and staying asleep. We have to feel secure in our environment, whether that's, locking the door or whatever you need to do, because that's a basic need. As far as sleep positions, it varies. It's really a personal thing. Sleeping on your back is really great though for like preventing wrinkles and like that smushed face in the morning. And sleeping on the side's actually pretty good for your brain and your stomach, your digestive system.
Because I've heard is that laying on the left side, that is going to be better if you've just eaten because it's going to better facilitate drainage out of the stomach. But for other people, the right side feels better. So just something to think about. But based on our anatomy, when we lay on our left side, that seems to help. Like if you have reflux or something, I probably wouldn't recommend sleeping on my right side.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, laying on your stomach is probably not the best as far as like posture and strain, but there are people who do it and it works for them.
Yeah. Whatever works for you. Yeah. And it's not about perfection. It's just, once again, looking at these nuances and figuring out what is right for you. Okay. So the last big question that I want to ask is, let's say you're a person who struggles with insomnia, whether you're formally diagnosed or not, you can't sleep, you wake up at 2 a.m. What do? Do you put on your blue blockers and watch TV? Do you scroll on your phone? Do you journal? Do you stay in the bed? What would you say to someone who it's been 10 minutes, they can't fall back asleep? What do?
Yeah. So I think the most evidence-based way to approach that is from something that is called CBTI. And it's a practice called stimulus control, which is basically if you are in bed and you're not sleeping and you want to sleep, and it's been about 10 minutes in your head, again, you're not watching a clock, but you get up out of bed and you go to another room and you do something in dim light that's relaxing and pleasant. It shouldn't be a punishment. You shouldn't have to like read a phone book. You could even watch TV if you wanted to, maybe wear your blue blockers. The idea with getting out of bed and going into another room is to really break the association between any kind of anxiety and stress in your bed. You don't want to be worrying and tossing and turning in your bed. So what you do is you just kind of go do something relaxing for a period of time. You could either designate, I'll stay out of the bedroom for 30 minutes, or you could wait until you're sleepy again and then go back to the bedroom. So it's a pretty well-respected way of dealing with sleep disturbances from the CBTI perspective. Mm-hmm. But again, not everyone's going to want to get out of bed, especially if, it's cold and you don't want to like freeze out in your living room. So another thing you could do is something called counter control. And that is when you are sitting up in bed and you maybe turn on a light just very dimly and you read or something like that. But the sitting up is basically a designated position that's different than lying down. So you're kind of creating that differential there. So yeah, those are a couple options on how to deal with wake ups and what to do when you're awake at night.
Yeah. And I think it just goes back to, if we correlate our bedroom with sleep and sex, then it's not the place where we're productive or getting work done or something like that. So if you continue to lay in bed when you can't sleep, then you might start to have the association that that's just a place where you're going to toss and turn. And it's like, get up, do something. Once again, not turning on bright lights. Please wear blue blockers if you have them. But for me, something that you just said would be ideal. Maybe I stay in bed, but I have an amber reading light, and reading a book will put me to sleep pretty quickly. But if I get on Instagram, I'm going to just get sucked in, even with the blue blockers. So I don't recommend TV or social media if you wake up. But for me, reading a book seems to help me go back to sleep.
Yeah.
And if I need to get out of the room, then I will.
Yeah. Yeah. I would definitely not get on social media at night if you're woken up, because you're just going to be more activated.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Okay. So lots of things that we covered today. And what are the big take homes that you want people to walk away with from this episode? If I remember earlier, you said, if you take nothing else, it would be
remember bright days and dark nights. So, and starting off with the morning sunlight as your little dose of sunlight in the morning. And also, secondly, being really consistent about your wake times and fairly consistent about your sleep times as well. But if you're consistent with your wake time, you're probably going to be consistent with your sleep time just as a default.
Yeah. And if people are struggling with this, I think it's really helpful to have a coach. I am not anti-doctor. And obviously you can work with a coach and a doctor, but a coach is going to spend more time with you and be able to troubleshoot with you on an individual basis because it's so different. So Morgan, how can people work with you, and what are the ways that people can work with you?
Yeah. So right now they can work with me one-to-one in my sleep coaching program. And they can actually reach out to me via my website and schedule what I call a sleep clarity call. So it's like a 20-minute chat where they bring their sleep issue to me and we chat about it. And I provide with them a couple of things they can start doing to turn their sleep around. So definitely reach out if you're struggling. And then again, obviously I'm on Instagram, which is where we met. My handle is morganadams.wellness. And also on my website, you can sign up for my free mini course about morning and evening routines, which is a great way to start the journey to better sleep, is with those solid evening and morning routines.
Beautiful. And if you send us links, we'll put them in the show notes for anyone watching. I so appreciate having you here, and sleep has changed my life and I've learned so much. And just be patient with yourself. And if you have any beliefs that are holding you back, you can reach out to either one of us, but sleep is life. I'm just a much happier, nicer person. I can better regulate my emotions, my appetite, everything. So maybe we can't see all the things that sleep is doing for us, but it is a non-negotiable. I would imagine that you would agree. And it's just,
100%.
Yeah, it's improved my quality of life so much. So if this is an area that you're stuck, please reach out. And I hope you learned something today. If you did, then let us know and tag both of us. We'll share in our stories. Thank you so much for being here today, Morgan. And I love recording this with you.
Thank you, Ashley.
I am absolutely loving this face primer from RMS Beauty. I get it from Citrine, which is a high maintenance hippie's one-stop shop for all things clean skincare and beauty. The RMS Beauty face primer is called Re-Evolve Radiance Locking Primer. The way that I use it is I clean my skin, I put on an antioxidant serum, I put the primer on, and then a light layer of lotion. Once I put my makeup on top of that, it looks flawless all day, so it helps it last longer and it just looks better, sits nicer on my face. And this product, you can save 10% with the code ASHLEYTAYLORWELLNESS, so check it out, and lots of other amazing options from Citrine. Thank you for listening to the High Maintenance Hippie podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast, rate it, and leave a review, ideally a 5-star review if you loved it. All of this is free of charge and really helps me to be able to run the podcast. If you take a screenshot and tag me, I'll repost you and shout you out on Instagram. So tag Ashley Taylor Wellness and High Maintenance Hippie Podcast. If you have any feedback or guests that you'd like to have, I would love to hear from you so that I'm not just talking at you. I really want to deliver things that are valuable. So send me an email with any feedback, suggestions, or ideas for guests at ashley@ashleytaylorwellness.com. And I will leave you with a disclaimer. Please know that this is not medical advice or a replacement for seeking medical care. Everything discussed on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. Always consult with your medical provider before making any changes. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.